So, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening from whichever part of the world you are joining us. Welcome to the series of workshop organized by Genesis Global School, Noida, India. We as Genesians believe in holistic development of our educators, and we have taken up this mission to share the knowledge and the best practices with the teaching community all around the world. And in the series today, we are gathered here to collaborate in the field of TOK, how to make it more a great learning experience. So we have here Mr. Rahul Singh, who is your workshop leader. He's an experienced MYP, IGCSE, and DP teacher with over a decade of international curricular experience. Utilizing strategies and skills developed in schools and from extensive worldwide research, he currently leads the TOK team in DP and facilitates Spanish classes in IGCSE and DP while also training educators in Spanish and TOK. A firm believer of the IB philosophy, Mr. Rahul encourages and supports problem based and inquiry based teaching and learning practices while motivating fellow educators to follow his lead. I I'm here as the moderator for this session. My name is Manish Srivastav, and there is one important information which I wanted to give to all of you who are there with us. That in the end we will be having a feedback session, and we'll sharing with you a form. And please fill this form as it is very important because with the help of this form, we'll be able to send you the participating certificates. So, Mr. Rahul, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Manish. I'm just checking my mic. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Manish, for that wonderful introduction. Um, in fact, it is actually a pleasure to work with you as well, I would say, learning from you in the whole arena of TOK, in the world of TOK, as we call it. We are lifelong learners, and it has been great working with you at Genesis. And thank you for that introduction. Without further ado, I would like to go ahead with this session, calling it, which is titled TOK, Making It a Great Learning Experience. I am Rahul Singh, and let's directly jump to the objectives of the session today. The first objective would be more like understanding the role of classroom agreements. So we're going to focus a bit on the whole idea of how the classroom agreements would be very important for a cohort dealing with TOK and all the other subjects that they study as a part of their DP requirements, and the classroom agreements playing an important role, the initial understanding that is established with the students as a very important role to for them to understand exactly the idea of what TOK is, what are the basic consensual agreements, I would say, within the classroom, what to expect, what not to expect. And then we'll be exploring a bit of the TOK framework because it is the central part of the whole idea of the implementation of the TOK curriculum. We are not going to touch into the technicalities of what we have already been seeing in a lot of workshops where we are talking about how to go ahead with the exhibition, how to go ahead with the TOK essay, what course to follow. These things are there in the guide itself, and we will have further sessions for those things.
Because the TOK is such.
I would also request everyone to mute themselves so that we can have a smooth functioning. And the third objective would be going through a series of examples. I have mentioned right examples, but again, in TOK, there's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. But right examples in the context for us to understand that what would be the right examples for the students, in fact, for the learners that we have in the cohort that is learning TOK. So let's go ahead and talk a bit about what we are going to talk about in detail. So we're going to relate a bit of the core in TOK, the IBDP core in TOK. We are going to talk about establishing those core values. But when we talk about these core values, these are not the core values of exactly the DP suggestions. These are the core values, keeping in context the cohort that you are teaching, the cohort of the learners that we have, very specific to the setup that we have in different schools, in different setups, the consensual agreements that we might want to have during the course of action of the implementation of TOK in 2 years. We're also going to talk a bit about the TOK framework, how it can help us in almost every possible aspect of the implementation of the DP curriculum. And the framework obviously consists of the scope, the perspectives, the methods and tools, and the ethics. And obviously, we will be jumping right ahead to the right examples. Again, the usage of the word right is for us to understand what can be right, and some examples for establishing the connections, and a very small session where we will be talking about a few steps to be taken for us as facilitators on how to really make it great. So with that, I would come to a very small section of reflection where I would want you to reflect for a minute. And this reflection would be very simple. The question is, if TOK were a person, which learner profile attribute would you assign to it to best describe it? So think of TOK as a subject that we call it. TOK is a part of the core element. So we cannot really call it a subject, but think of TOK as a person. And if you look at TOK, and if you look
I
at
would
TOK,
I would
I
request
think
participants please mute yourself so that we have a smooth workshop where you can listen to the workshop leader. And then if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and then we can put forward your question in front of the workshop leader. I would request all of you please mute yourself. Thank you very much.
yes. So let's go ahead with this reflection. I think by now, Mr. Manish would have already posted the link. It's a word cloud that where you're supposed to just put in one of the learner profile attributes that you might want to assign to TOK as a person. And let's see which word exactly, which attribute exactly wins the bet. So with that, I would stop sharing my screen and I would want to shift to poll everywhere thing.
The link is already there in the chat section.
I do think the list is growing, Mr. Manish.
Sir, your screen is not visible. Can you put up the screen on? Can you share the screen?
Yes, give me a moment.
Miss Amani, we will take your question very soon. I see your hand is raised. We will talk to you very soon.
Is the screen visible, Mr. Manish?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Well, I do say thinker growing. Um, just a reminder, if you're putting any learner profile attribute which has a set of two words, try and remove the space in between so that it can go together. The samplers were there, like open-minded here, but okay, thinker is growing. Okay, thinker wins the bet, I would say. So, Mr. Manish, would you agree with people calling this person TOK as thinker? Is
Yes, I absolutely agree because TOK is based on different perspectives, and I think if you're a thinker, you can have a different perspective from what I am thinking. So I think that's a very good selection.
exactly, and we do have some different typos related to thinker as well, because some people are typing thinkers, And there was a typo, so I think
connectivity issues, etc. Connectivity issues at either end, ours or the students, sometimes logs the participant out. Please be mindful about students who may get logged out and logged again. Remember,
I would request the participant to mute yourself, please, so that we have a smooth running. Yes, sir. Continue, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Manish. So I do think that we can move on to the next section. Let me share the slide again. I hope it is visible, Mr. Manish.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So apart from this reflection, we are at activity 1 here. But before we go ahead with the activity 1, I would just want to let you know that today's session would be more about us as facilitators, thinking, participating, doing small activities, a lot of them, so that we as facilitators are the first people to really understand how TOK would function in the context of the cohort. So it's very important for us to understand that at times there is a taboo related to TOK in the schools that we work for, the schools that we are a part of. The TOK has that fear factor, I would say the word. Many people try not to get near this thing, but eventually, if we are teaching DP, even if it is a very small subject group, we are automatically becoming TOK facilitators. So based on that, it's a very simple workshop where we are going to try and understand how we can develop, let's say, that question that can start the conversation in the class. Let's say that image that can start the conversation in the class. Let's say a very small idea of letting the students be the agents and we just being the facilitators and not really teachers. So yes, activity 1 is there. You would see a Padlet link, which would already be there. Mr. Manish would have posted it. Just a minute about the relevance of TOK. We have to reflect about the relevance of TOK as a part of the core element. I'm not displaying the diploma core model because we all know, if we know TOK, we know that TOK forms a part of the diploma core. So just go to the Padlet. You would see activity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 listed there. Click on the plus sign right under activity 1 and just comment about your understanding of the importance of TOK. The idea is to highlight the importance of TOK as a core element of the DP curriculum. Our thinking, why do we think that TOK is an important part of the core element of the DP curriculum? Along with this, let me try and see if we can access the Padlet. I do see a lot of answers coming up. Mr. Manish, if you would be kind enough to, let's say, talk about 1 or 2 points there.
Yes, sir. I will definitely.
And I think I can display it now. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Manish, any idea how do you like this Padlet background that we have there?
Different perspective, a very
Okay.
background.
Okay, so what all can we think of when we see this particular image? There is a purpose that I have put, or we have decided to put that image there, of the comparison of 2 cameras. Let's say one camera is the real camera. The photos were taken at the same time, and these were, one camera was really not implementing any artificial intelligence features. I do see a comment by someone in the activity 2. Please make sure that you're commenting on the activity 1. We still have to reach the activity 2 as of now.
Sir, someone has written that entire profiles or learner profiles needs to be included. Include the entire learner profile. I think we have to see this. Why this has been mentioned here.
Would
This is
someone
something
want
which.
to, yeah, would someone want to comment exactly at this? I think we can talk about this a bit here. If someone is ready to comment, put the thoughts in, we can take one or two comments, Mr. Manish, if someone wants to raise the hand and go ahead and talk.
If you want to raise the hand, please raise your hand and we will let you speak. Uh, Miss Kavalya Menon, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Hope I'm pronouncing
Yes.
your name correctly, but please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think learner profile is very much embedded in every strategy or every perspective we include in IB programs, any of the program, especially in TOK, because TOK itself is comes as a challenge for student, because once they have done MYP, me being MIP coordinator, I have seen the transition of that personal project submission, and then suddenly they are into TOK. So they look, it's like looking from a small hole and then zooming out. So TOK becomes like that. So definitely they have all the learner profiles. To be developed further. I don't think any one of them is left out.
True, true.
Thank
Means
you.
can be accepted, but again, because it's TOK, we cannot completely agree, we cannot completely disagree. But yes, I would say that I do agree with this, but if there's someone who disagrees with it, that is also completely fine. So
Sir,
we
there
do
is
have.
one more person, Saroja Raman, wants to say
Mhm.
something. Let's take one more perspective, sir.
Okay,
Yes, so,
please.
hi everyone. I was wondering that the intention was to classify TOK per se into a category, or was it about the knowers and classifying them into the LPs?
No, that was the initial activity. That was just a reflection. Here
All right.
in this activity, what we are doing is we are asking you to reflect upon the importance of TOK or the relevance of TOK as a part of the core element of the DP curriculum.
Yeah, so I could add to that by saying that it completes the program, because unless we are able to make reflection a part of the entire process, TOK guides you to reflecting on the kind of knowledge that you are always surrounded by, and whether the entire element of trusting the knowledge for what it is without even questioning it is
True,
what we would want us learners to go back to and think about.
true, true. Completely agreed. So with this, I think we would stop taking the questions, Mr. Manish. People
Yes,
can
sir.
still go on commenting on the link. It is live for the next 48 hours. So whenever you get time, if by any chance you're on your phone and you're unable to comment right away, access Padlet. Just a moment. Let me start the presentation again. So along with this, I would just want to talk a bit about the TOK being an important element of the IBDP core. You must recognize this small statement from the TOK guide itself. It very simply states that TOK explores questions about knowledge and the process of knowing. Process is very important. At times, TOK is not about acquiring new knowledge. And that's why it always emphasizes comparisons, connections, developing perspectives, the different areas of knowledge that we have. And it obviously encourages students to become more aware of their own perspectives and the perspectives of others, which is very important. The community, the global community, the local community, comparisons, perspectives, respecting them. The whole idea of values come in as a concept out of the 12 concepts of TOK. So this is the whole idea, core element. TOK being very important, being very relevant. Yesterday in our session with Extended Essay, we also talked a bit about it, that why TOK helps Extended Essay helps. Extended Essay and TOK at times help the whole idea of CAS, how CAS supports the core elements as TOK and Extended Essay. So this would be the idea of how the core element goes ahead with TOK being a very important part. Along with this, I would come to talk about the core values. When we say these core values are some of the core values that should be initially introduced to the students in a classroom setup. So a very small understanding of the core values with the students, having the initial conversation with the students where you're simply talking to them about what TOK comprises of, so that they have the initial understanding and they're comfortable with the idea for the coming 24 months or the 23 months or the 22 months that they're going to spend with TOK. So very basic understandings where we are simply talking about TOK mainly consists of questions. We are all responsible for the content that is forming the part or forming the knowledge, the combined knowledge, the community that is the cohort or the community that is global or the community that is local, referring to the city that they are a part of, referring to the country that they are a part of. It is completely fine to have disagreements, but that doesn't mean that you would start hating the person or you would start developing, let's say, a dislike towards the person. And obviously, multiple perspectives are important in TOK. Having said that, these are the core values to be obviously established. Having said that, I would go ahead to activity 2. Now is the time to go ahead, same Padlet link, click on activity 2. And just based on the core values that we have just seen, I'll go back to this. These are the 4 basic core values that I would suggest to be implemented in the classroom for the students to maybe have an understanding of what TOK comprises of. Right after that, we would try and reflect on our classrooms. Think of the learners very specific to the cohort that you are dealing with. The cohort can be very small in size, the cohort can be very big in size. So obviously you have to be very specific to the cohort size, the behavior of the cohort, the character of the cohort, and then think of the essential disagreements that might arise in the classroom. And right after that, based on the core values that we discussed, think of one term, just one term of a consensual agreement that the cohort is going to pledge to, or maybe based on the cohort and the nature of the cohort, you can ask them to sign an agreement, like an idea that, okay, we talked about this, and just post one consensual agreement that you think can be important, like as a set of the consensual agreements that we are going to have with the cohort. Just go to activity 2, post it there. Mr. Manish, please update me if there are some interesting comments coming up.
Yes, sir.
And as I told you, there will be a lot of talking here. There will be a lot of activities here. We would request you to participate as much as possible because TOK is about that. TOK is about discussions. TOK is not about teaching. TOK is about learning with the cohort. So just put in your participation as much as you can. We are not going to touch up on a lot of technical aspects of TOK where we are taking information from the guide, talking about it, because we have seen a series of workshops coming up from IB itself. And
Sir,
yes,
a
sir.
few of them. To authenticate knowledge gain is one of the participants, you can say, he or she shared like that. Another one shared, check the source of information.
Okay, okay. The
Think
whole idea
deep-
of plagiarism. Okay, okay.
yes, think deeper and share.
Or even, let's say, think deeper and share is completely a very good suggestion. But I would say that let's say in the initial phase, at times we might find a few learners in the cohort that might not be able to think deeper. So the idea of sharing is very important, I would say. The moment they start sharing, that inhibition goes away, that, okay, I might be wrong, I might be right, I don't know what situation I'm at. So based on that, I would say sharing is more important. Think and share would be the right suggestion to start with. And obviously, when the cohort starts understanding the importance of TOK, the relevance of TOK, they start linking it with various subjects, their own 6 subject choices that they have. It becomes automatically evident that they have to think deeper. Yes, Mr. Manish.
Experience the depth of knowledge and collaboration.
Depth of knowledge. Um, yes, collaboration I agree with, but depth of knowledge again, yes, I agree with the point. But again, the depth of knowledge also has to be defined. Uh, for one person, the depth of knowledge could only be the technicalities of a certain aspect. For one person, the depth of knowledge could be the philosophical part of it. So again, when we use the term depth of knowledge, we have to have a discussion in the class, even if it's a 15-minute discussion with the cohort. What do we mean by the depth of knowledge? Because they do have to understand that there is a certain let's say scope attached to it. The framework which we are coming to, which we're going to talk about, will talk in detail about that. But yes, a good suggestion. Mr. Manish, anything else coming up?
I just want to read one more. Ethical
Yes.
impact of pursuing certain types of technology. Example, using AI cars or loitering ammunition, armed
Thank you.
drones and combat. Our knowledge of moral dilemma is a rich TOK space for variety of views.
Okay, ethics being one of the core elements of the framework that we are going to implement and that we are going to talk about. Yes, a very good point. So with this, I would move to this slide where uh, it's a very basic set of consensual agreements that I might have suggested, but this doesn't mean that it's a final list. It's just about a few points so that the students know that these are the things that they are supposed to be following. Eye contact during communication, a very simple point, but it might mean that the idea of confidence being there, the idea of the whole idea of values being there as one of the important concepts out of the 12 concepts of TOK. Open minded, opinions of others, where we are talking about the perspectives, respecting the opinions, again, forms a part of interpretation, values as the 12 concepts, reflect before you state your own preconceived idea. Very important. Reflection on your own idea is very important. Accepting others' ideas as well while you're reflecting before saying something at times becomes, uh, I would say, very important. Taunt, sarcasm. At times we might not even realize, but there is a certain hatred towards or a certain dislike towards a person who's not doing something that we are doing, or who's not doing things according to what we want them to do. And automatically our tone starts getting into that idea of taunt, sarcasm. So the idea is, the moment we start recognizing that as a classroom objective, everyone's opinion is important. No taunt, no sarcasm. These things would be very important. Communicate what you feel and without any personal bias. So the communication part comes in here. As I said, uh, think deeper and share. Was this one of the points, Mr. Manish?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It was.
So think deeper comes at a certain later stage, but communicate. Sharing is very important. Whatever you feel without any personal bias. If you can look into the bias part of it, that would be very important. Always ask for clarifications if you do not understand, and do not pretend, because TOK will get you. TOK is something that will eventually catch up with you if you're pretending, let's say, to know in the initial phase. Later on, it will start catching up with the idea that you have avoided. So it's always better to have a lot of discussions in the starting phase to be able to establish these agreements, Clarifications are important. No question is right or wrong, as long as we're respecting the values, the core values established within the classroom, within the cohort. And obviously, everyone is free to have an opinion, express it without inhibitions. And it's very important to have fun while you learn, because without that, TOK starts getting those tags. It's boring, it's not interesting, it's something I don't know, it's something I don't understand. That is something that we have to start addressing in the classrooms. That's how we will be able to start making it a fun learning experience for our learners as facilitators. So we have to understand that the students need to implement these agreements, these terms within the classroom. That would be, I think, very important. That would bring me to the whole idea of the TOK framework. It's very important to understand that framework is something that is implemented throughout the core theme, the optional themes, the areas of knowledge, whatever we are teaching. The students have to keep in mind the four aspects of the framework, which we are going to see in the next slide. So I'll just read it out for you, and the highlighted thing in red is very important here to understand. So we are saying the TOK course plays a special role in the DP by providing an opportunity for students to reflect on the nature, scope, and limitations of knowledge. Nature, scope, limitations, very important, and the process of knowing. In this way, the main focus, very important to understand, of TOK is not on the students acquiring new knowledge. So TOK is never about, let's say, trying to dig deeper into a certain knowledge, or trying to read more, or trying to acquire a lot of new knowledge. It's always about reflecting on the knowledge that already exists, or the knowledge that we already know about. Reflecting on it will automatically increase the whole idea of the nature of knowledge that we have. The same knowledge can be reflected upon, can be talked about in the certain context of the limitations that are there with reference to the community that we belong to. So it's very important to understand that TOK is also putting into perspective what they already know. So this is the framework which will bring us to the idea of the pillars of the TOK framework. We are going to talk a bit about uh, these four aspects, or the pillars of the TOK framework, with a certain hint of the core theme, which is the knowledge and the knower. So the knower will be there in the center of today's presentation, whatever we are going to talk about with the pillars of the TOK framework. So the first pillar is scope. Scope is more about, let's see, Mr. Manish, if somebody wants to comment, we can take one perspective of someone who can talk about what would we mean with this term scope, or within the TOK framework.
Yes, sir. Please, if you want to comment, please raise your hand. If you want to express your views, you can write in the chat section also.
Yes, that is welcome, Mr. Manish. If the comments start coming in, you can talk about it. But scope is more about the limits, the limits, not about restricting them, or the limits about the. It's more about how well can we see the limits, in not in the sense of limiting it, the limits in the sense of expanding it. How well can we go ahead with a certain area of knowledge, with a certain a set of knowledge, with the perspective of the knower, how well we know what we know. It's very important. Perspectives are very important. Have we looked into, let's say, the perspective of somebody else who's involved in the same situation, which we might not be aware of? So multiple perspectives come into play. Very important. Research would be very important here. Watching different things, because the new age learners love technology. So we can also talk about perspectives through the usage of a lot of technology, a lot of videos, a lot of different sources. But yes, the development of perspectives would be also very important. The methods and tools that define our knowledge, or the methods and tools that define the whole idea of what we know. So it's more about how we know what we already know, and ethics, the most important. Um, I would say the most, I would use the word problematic area, where the students really have to understand that balance, where they have to understand that there are situations where they cannot really take a decision. They just have to be aware of perspectives for the ethics, but there are certain cases. The very famous trolley problem that we have in TOK has been used for years now. So ethical implications about any action being taken, the knowledge about um, is there a bias in a certain aspect where we are the agents of taking the decision, and then there are ethical implications. So it's very important to understand these things and how we can implement them in our subjects. So right after this, understanding scope, perspectives, methods and tools, and ethics, I would want to take you to a series of activities. I would say it's very important that the next 4 activities that we are going to have, we have to understand what exactly we are going to do. So we have 4 activities. You do see the Padlet link, and right now we'll be moving to activity 3. And here we go. This is our activity scope. Uh, we have taken certain questions which can be related to different subjects. The subject, I would request you to mute yourself. Yes, thank you. So these are the questions taken from the guide itself with the perspective of the knower, the core theme as we talked about. So I would want you to reflect for a minute on these 4 questions. Go through them, read through them, take a minute, take 2 minutes. My suggestion, my request from you would be to pick one question that goes in sync with the unit that you're teaching right now, the unit that you're implementing right now, or the unit that you're going to implement, let's say after a month, after a couple of weeks, and try and tweak this question, which reflects a bit of the idea of asking the right question in the context of the unit that you're going to implement. It can be subject specific. These questions are already in the TOK specific format, with the idea of the knower, with knower being at the center of these questions. The idea here is to pick one question, tweak it a bit, include the aspect of the unit that you're teaching in your particular subject, and just pick that one question, tweak it, and put it in the activity 3 tab of the Padlet link that we have. Mr. Manish, let me know if there are questions coming up. And just in case, if you do not want to include anything very specific to your subject, just put in brackets the name of the subject so that we can relate to it. The questions, we can pick up 1 or 2 questions. We can talk about them while we move to the series of activities where we have activity 4, 5, and 6. The moment we're done with activity 6, we would be in a position to be at a situation where we can actually feel confident, let's say, about using TOK as a tool in our subjects and making it fun for the students. Yes, Mr. Manish.
I would like to read, sir, some comments which are coming on the chat section, sir.
Please, go ahead.
One comment from Amani is collaboration again in making sure that the facilitator should make sure that the students are on the right track.
This is in the agreement, the consensual agreement section.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yes. Is there any other comment related to the consensual agreements?
Yeah, I am just looking into that, sir.
Sure, sir.
Mr. Mohit is saying, hi, sir, can we discuss it for mathematics?
Which one, Mr. Mohit?
I think these questions he's referring to.
Yes, Mr. Manish, try and tweak it a bit. Think about the unit that you're, is it Mr. Mohit, Mr. Manish?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Mohit, try and think about these questions. We can discuss it. The moment you post the question, we can get in touch with you. And at the end of this session, we are going to provide you with the email ID. So you can obviously talk about it. We can have a conversation regarding that. just try and put it in bracket mathematics. We can pick it up from there, the Padlet activity, and we can talk about it. There's no problem. This is with the perspective of the knower, or you can just put it in the chat, the unit that you're implementing, and we can talk about it.
Sir, Ms. Sujata is saying, can you explain the activity, please?
Yes. But Sujata, the idea is here in this activity, this will be the same for the next 3 slides. Activity 3 right now is about choosing one question that you feel is closest enough to the unit that you're implementing right now, or any future unit that you're going to implement in the DP cohort, with reference to the subject group that you belong to, or with reference to the subject that you're teaching. Try and tweak this question a bit, like add a word or two to this question to make it very specific to the unit that you're implementing, so that we start thinking about the questions, the right questions to be asked, that we can implement directly in the unit and start making it, let's say, fun learning for the students, so that they can go back and forth from their subject to TOK, extended essay, CAS, going back to the subject, or different subjects. So just think about it. See, no suggestion is right or wrong. Again, we can talk a bit in detail about those things. We can start commenting on the Padlet link. It will be live for you to access. Even if you access the Padlet link, we'll start commenting on everything. Everybody can see that. It is a good collaboration platform, and that's why it's always important to submit your question under the right activity. So the Padlet link, activity 3, just click on the plus sign, post it there. Just put if you are not sure about a specific term from your subject, just post in the bracket the name of your subject. It can be maths, it can be, yes, sir, please.
I want to take 2 more important questions, sir. I think you should address these questions.
Please go ahead.
I think Jolly is saying that Ms. Jolly Raizada is saying that can it be related to global warming? And another participant is saying, can we adapt this activity to any subject like PHE?
Yes. Okay, what criteria can we use? Let's pick up the first one, the random one, PHE. What criteria can we use to distinguish between knowledge and opinion? Just we'll remove the belief here. Knowledge and opinion in the implementation of, let's say, physical exercises, what we know and what are the opinions of others. And then you can include a bit of science in it, where the doctors have a certain opinion, but the doctors have a certain set of knowledge. At times, they cannot really transfer the knowledge to you. They can simply talk about the opinion that is coming through. Then there is a certain set of knowledge developed through, let's say, a certain research, but gradually the opinion starts developing. The belief is that in certain sections, like the kitchens of India, the belief is that you cannot eat a certain thing with a certain thing. But the moment you start traveling, different aspects, perspectives, the moment you start traveling, you see that those two things in combination are making an exotic dish itself. So the challenges about food there, the challenges about the beliefs there are certain things we can, it's more about choosing the certain thing, asking the right question, and let the students be the agents. It's very important. The learners that we have in the cohort. Global warming was another question, right, Mr. Manish?
Sir, we have a very important question here from Mr. David. I think it's going to answer a lot of people who are sitting here, a lot of doubts which are there in their mind. I think you should address this question. So it says that it's not critical to validate the sources of information. Is it not critical to validate the sources of information? Is it so easy to present opinions as fact using today's technology? How do we ensure our students are not misled? The new and common term, fake news.
Exactly. So the social media, we're going to talk a bit about social media here. Fake news, social media, always in sync, and how we can let our students be the agents, our learners be the agents. But yes, we are going to automatically answer this and provide the right, I would say, base to this knowledge in certain slides at a later stage. So are we done with activity 3? Do we have certain questions there, Mr. Manish?
One more we can take, sir. General awareness and understanding about bias.
Mm-hmm. So general awareness and understanding about bias, is that one of the questions taken from here? Has it been tweaked or?
Yes, I think the question has been tweaked by Miss Akanksha.
But general understanding and question about bias, what was it? Can you repeat it, sir?
General awareness and an understanding about bias.
Okay, so general awareness and understanding about bias is more about how we talk about bias, how we introduce the idea of bias. Like we know that a certain aspect of our knowledge might be influenced by our nationality, by our belonging to a religious community, let's say, and that bias automatically gets in. So the understanding, the reflection, again, we will get back to the initial point where reflection is very important. Is a certain community better than the other communities, let's say? A very important question. These questions are important as the core value in the classroom, and let them be the agents, let them discuss it. The bias, yes, can be talked about in detail with the introduction of certain examples, which we are going to see. Let's move to activity 4 now, I would say, the idea of perspectives. Again, the idea is here to choose one question, which you see here in the slide. And maybe if you want to tweak it a bit, and if you want to simply say that this question fits the unit that I'm implementing or my subject, you can simply copy and paste it and put it in bracket the subject that you're referring it with. Perspectives, a very simple question that can initiate a conversation. What shapes my perspective as a knower? If I'm good at maths, what shapes my perspective in mathematics? There are certain students who do have the fear factor of mathematics as a subject, or there are certain students who are very good at mathematics. So what are my perspectives? Is there a certain bias if I am going to talk about, let's say, mathematics as a subject? So many things, we can tweak it a bit. Let's spend a minute or two here on the activity 4, and then we'll move to activity 5. Mr. Manish, if there are certain questions coming up, please let me know.
Yes. I would request participants, if you have a problem in accessing the Padlet link, then you can put your questions on the chat section also, please.
Yes, and if you're putting it in the chat section, just mention activity 4 so that we know that it is related to activity 4.
How can we know in physics that current knowledge is improvement of the past knowledge?
Wow. We have been talking about it. Mr. Manish himself is a physics teacher, and we have been talking about it so much, but in the old curriculum, the whole idea of current knowledge, the old knowledge, the development, the methods and tools, the next aspect, the next pillar of the TOK framework actually answers that really well. Right, Mr. Manish?
Yes, sir. Miss Aditi, how can we know that current knowledge is an improvement on past knowledge? Biology, actually, and she's writing about biology, I think.
So how can we know? Again, we are maybe talking about the methods and tools here, a bit of perspectives here, but methods and tools would be more important, because the moment you're saying how can we know that current knowledge is an improvement, past knowledge, biology, it's more like we'll have to explore the idea where you're talking about more towards the perspectives, where the knower is knowing about certain aspects and the base of the knowledge, and is there a certain bias. And the moment we transfer this question to methods and tools, we can take ahead the certain ideas, the methods that are implemented to compare the knowledge, the tools that are implemented to compare the knowledge. So automatically we can see that these questions can also be shifted from one pillar to the other as well, depending upon how minutely or how finely do you tweak it in respect to your subject. So are there more questions coming in, Mr. Manish?
Yes, sir. And she has, I think, suggested the knowledge which she's actually referring to: microscopes, DNA fingerprinting, genetics in biology, I think.
I would say that, again, this same question can be taken if we are talking a lot about the methods and tools here. I would take the same question to methods and tools. But yes,
I would
it can be.
one question in politics also, sir, which looks very good to me, actually. rather
Please.
two. What shapes my perspectives as a knower in politics? And in politics, again, one more question. I think both are interrelated. Do we have an obligation to know more?
Okay. Okay, this can be discussed. Do we have an obligation to know more? This can go on for, I think, for 4 or 5 sessions. This is such an interesting question. And what shapes my perspective as a knower in politics is, again, that there is a certain bias present there. The whole idea of the implementation of let's say technology in politics nowadays, how this whole US fiasco was controlled by the technical biggies, how Twitter started something that was never done before, and other tech biggies followed it. Politics, technology, a very perfect syncing, a very perfect combination. But again, let them be the agents. Let the learners be the agents. You have to be the facilitator, not the teacher. It's very important to understand that in TOK, it's very important to stop them, let's say, from digressing, but it's also important to not control where they're going. There is a very fine line there. You just want them not to touch certain aspects. Let's say you want them to go in a certain direction, but that direction also has to be uh, a very unknown kind of direction, where you know that the learner is going towards a certain area, but these are the areas that the learner might have to avoid. So it's very important that fine line. Let them be the agents. Let them take responsibility for what they're discussing in the classroom. You be there, talk to them, listen to them. Perspectives are important. We might hear, as facilitators, we might end up hearing ideas that are brilliant, that we might have never thought about earlier. With this, I would move to activity 5, the methods and tools. Again, there can be an overlap of the questions. Just think of one question again, a very quick request for you. Mr. Manish, are there still people joining in?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So there is one very interesting thing which I have read just now. I'll just read it for you, because we have not taken any perspective from language acquisition. So I can just read that.
Yes,
Experiences in language acquisition, how much of our knowledge depends on our interactions with our knower?
Yes, obviously, language acquisition, how much of our knowledge base is developed with different interactions that we have had. Let's say in the childhood, if we are exposed to different languages, the whole idea of Mr. Chomsky comes in, where the idea of generative grammar, the innate language, all of it can be discussed. But we don't really need to have this basic understanding that the student should know this. You don't have to delve deeper in the philosophical part of it, but yes, the tools, the scope of the development of knowledge through different interactions, different languages. Being a language learner, there is a claim that says that if you can speak more than 2 languages or 2 languages, you might avoid certain chances of dementia at a later stage. Very good example of sciences being related to languages. You can just, it's the idea of creating that perfect example, that perfect discussion. Sit back, relax. If you've started this conversation, sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation that is going on in the class, intervene when important. So do we have questions coming in for activity 5? Yes.
Can we take a question from anyone now? If someone wants to ask, they can raise their hand and we can ask them to.
Yes, yes, sir, please.
I think we can go ahead, sir, because I can't see any hands.
Sure.
But I'm
so this
still are sharing their views on the chat section.
Yes.
And I can see if learner participation is not controlled to some extent, would they not digress from TOK aims and objectives?
Yes. So that's what I said, intervene when necessary. You should have it as facilitators, you should have it clear somewhere as an idea that I would not use the word control. I would just use the word facilitate, maneuver them smoothly through the areas that you do not want them to go into. So the basic understanding has to be there. Obviously, I do agree with that. I would not use the word control here, but yes, intervening when necessary.
Should
With
we
this,
have
I
TOK
think,
in
Mr. Manish,
English? Sir, can you take one more question? I think this is important.
please, sir.
Should we have TOK in English in language acquisition classes to express themselves better? I think she's referring to like your class of Spanish if you are there. Like, so should we have TOK in English in language acquisition classes to express themselves better?
I would hold on to this question for the next 5 minutes, I would say. It's a very good question. I'm going to address it, but let's say after 5 minutes. With this, I would want to move to activity 6. We have again 4 questions. This is the end of the series of the activities that you're going to have. We would start seeing your answers in the Padlet right away. Let's say just click on the plus sign under activity 6. Always refer to that image that has been posted there as the background of the Padlet. What do you think about artificial intelligence there? Both the photos were taken at the same time. Can you tell that? Can you say that? Refer to that image. That image can initiate a big conversation within the classrooms. So do we have certain questions coming up, Mr. Manish, in the activity 6 tab of the Padlet?
I don't see, sir, in activity 6, but in activity 5, I can see still people are writing.
Okay. So we can wait for a minute. We might have to extend by 10 minutes. I would quickly take us through certain examples.
How can I read, sir?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
How do our expectations and perceptions impact our learning of historical events?
Depending upon the books that we have read, depending upon the writers that we have read who has written those books, depending upon the historians, we can initiate this conversation. The historians with a certain set of bias, the historical bias that we always talk about. Yes, but again, let them come up with this. If you see that this term is not coming up that you want them to talk about, introduce the term again, sit back, relax, intervene when necessary. Let them discuss it, let them have it. Uh, Intervene again, the word control, I would just want to tweak it down a bit, like let's say mellow it down a bit. We cannot really control the learning. We cannot really, I would say, control the flow of the perspectives, because the moment we start implementing, no, you cannot do this, that's the moment where the whole idea of the consensual agreements would start failing, where they have to share whatever they feel like. Yes, Mr. Manish.
I think we need to we can move ahead, sir, because I've seen only one question from Ms. Pallavi in activity 6. It says that under what circumstances do we have a moral duty to share what we know? Example, coronavirus pandemic data.
Yes, a lot of bias there, a lot of things to discuss. I would not get into that, but yes, a lot of things to discuss, a lot of perspectives, a lot of countries learning a lot of things, a lot of countries learning from other countries, a lot of countries learning from the global politics that is happening, the whole vaccine politics that's happening. Yes, it's an amazing set of things that you can discuss, but again, it's as of now, everyone would be saturated with that knowledge. But again, if we can take this up, let's say when the pandemic is over, 6 months after that, that would be again becoming very interesting. But yes, uh, coronavirus would be there as a part of TOK for ages to come. The whole idea of COVID-19. Yes, sir.
Ms. Saroj or Raman wants to say something. Please, Ms. Saroj, please go ahead if you raised your hand actually.
Yeah, at that point, I was actually reflecting on the idea that when would you really assume intervention to be right in a discussion, and often we tread into sensitive discussions, but the idea of curbing sensitive discussions just under the clout of the consensual bit of which we were referring. I don't know. There is a very dicey ground that we are dealing with here.
Let's not call it dicey. Let's call it
Tricky.
situational, because when you say a sensitive topic, um, there are religiously sensitive topics based on the context of certain countries. So
It could
that
could be ethics, right?
yes,
Could
in
be.
the context of a certain country, you might not want to get into the topic of religion, because there is a certain element of a very strong emotional value attached to it. You might not want to put yourself into the center of that discussion. So yes, those are the things. But yes, again, the intervention points, as I said, can be discussed, can be talked about, can be thought about, very specific to the cohort, the local community, the global community. How global are we aiming to become through how local knowledge is shaping or helping that global knowledge? And at times, you might simply want to stay away from certain topics based on certain cultures, based on certain countries, based on certain religions, in the cohort, in the location of your school, in the geographical location of your school. You might not want to get into certain areas, but yes, you can. And always, if you think that there is a point of intervention, sensitive is very subjective. Technically, here, sensitive can be defined through the context of the community that you're talking about. So always have a discussion with your TOK leader, the person who's controlling, let's say, or heading the TOK department, or always go to your DP coordinator, tell him in advance or tell her in advance that, okay, I'm going to take up this. Do you think it is a good idea? Always the head of schools, the leadership team, take it to them if you think it can get sensitive. But
Uh,
do not, but yes, please.
yeah, I just wanted to say that, at times redirecting it to the knowledge framework and getting it to make it more real for the knower within the framework would help, because I will not be completely taking off their query, but I would direct them to thinking into other ways possible.
Certainly, certainly. Yes, completely agree.
Sir, Ms.
Yes.
Sujata has, I think we should discuss this. And she has said that earlier she said that we can discuss, but we should be able to discuss anything in TOK. And then she said that we have knowledge and religion in optional themes. Uh, so these two things are there. I think you
So,
can discuss this.
can you talk about the first point, sir? What was it?
She says that, but we should be able to discuss anything in TOK.
Yes, yes, I do agree, but there are certain contexts where that's why I said it's very important to recognize the definition of anything again. You might not want to get into a certain aspect based on a certain let's say idea of the definition of the religion, the country. There are certain aspects that you might want to avoid. Again, have a conversation with the leadership team that this is what I'm going to introduce. Do you think it is fine? Always have that if you think it is going to get sensitive. But yes, I do agree, we should be free to discuss anything.
Can't we have agreement at the beginning of the roles and ethics at the beginning of the discussion? I hope I'm taking the same name correctly, Amani.
Yes. See, again, they are the series here is basically the ethics can start with it. Scope can be at the end. There's no problem. There's no definitive, I would say, series to follow. It is just this presentation following the series, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow this. You can just start with the ethical implications. You can start with the scope. You can talk about perspectives at the very start. It's completely how you want to design it, how you want to design your idea of the implementation, of the facilitation that you're going to do with the learners, the perfect Cohort TOK understanding that you're going to create in your classroom?
I think we can move ahead, sir.
Yes. So this brings me to this very famous TOK problem in my context. So I would like to start this conversation with you, Mr. Manish. We are at the third stage of the objectives where we're going to talk about certain situations. And Mr. Manish, I would like to I'd like you to answer this question. Um, and before we go ahead with this, I just want to ask everyone to be patient. We might finish in the next 6 or 7 minutes. We have overshot, but again, it's TOK and there's no end to it and there's no definition to it as such. So if you want to stay, it's fine. Otherwise, in the chat, Mr. Manish is going to post the feedback form. Please make sure that you fill up the feedback form and please make sure that you provide the email ID as updated by Mr. Manish so that we can send you your participation certificates. At the end of the presentation in the next 6 or 7 minutes, we would be talking about the email IDs. So my email ID would be there. You can get in touch anytime you want. You can get in touch with any question you want. Along with that, Mr. Manish, right after posting the feedback form link, let's go ahead with a certain discussion here.
I have posted, sir.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Manish, let's say we have this iOS, the famous iOS and the famous Android. So I would like to start with the question, which platform do you use in your cellular device?
Oh, I am an avid iOS user, sir.
When you say that, avid iOS user, do you have a certain bias right there?
Absolutely, sir.
Why do you think you are using the term avid iOS user?
At my age, I always look for first thing is secure platform. So I think iOS is much secure as compared to Android, because on Android you can have a lot of you can say viruses possible, but iOS is safe in that regard. And you know that there are a lot of other things which are associated with iOS. When they release any update, there are always rules and regulations with along with that update, which sometimes is not there on Android. So these are the things which have made me stick to iOS only on all different platforms, be it a laptop, be it an iPad, or be it a phone.
So I was an iOS user, Mr. Manish, and I found it very restrictive, I would say. Very controlled. I would now use the term controlled. So in that context, I am an Android user now because it gives me the liberty to be the user because I have paid for a certain, let's say, platform, which is Android or the device that I'm using. And would you dislike me for that? Because I'm not an avid iOS user.
I will not dislike you, sir, but I will have a different perspective there. I will say that if you have an avalanche of information available, sometimes it makes it difficult to narrow down to the resource which we need actually.
Yes.
The correct information which is required. So I think if you have avalanche of information available for you, it's again something which is, I would not say it is negative, but it is something which will not make us settle down onto a particular information.
Exactly. And when you use the term secure, you said that iOS was secure. So how do we know that iOS is more secure than Android for that reason, let's say for that aspect, or if we are doing that comparison?
Sir, when we discussed this, I attended one of 2 or 3 workshops which are organized by Apple, and I have heard from them that the algorithms which are written for iOS devices are such that to enter the viruses into them is very difficult. Though I'm not a technical person in those aspects, but I have actually believed over years on Apple, and it has been available for a very long time.
So I would stick to the word that you used. It's more about belief for us, right? Because
Yes.
because most of the tech companies nowadays are more into this whole idea of security, which is not defined, which doesn't even have a defined cyber law, which doesn't even talk about. They are talking about encryption, but encryption is done by a machine that can encrypt at and decrypt as well, artificial intelligence in play here. Talking about this whole, I would use it, the marketing gimmick, business coming into play in this TOK problem, where we can talk about technology was already talked about. Now we can talk about business coming into play. Do you think it's a marketing gimmick? Keeping the price high, using these terms as avid iOS user might make you socially more relevant?
Uh, I would not say that. I would say that it's more of a comfort situation because one person is. I've been using it for a very long period of time, and I think I'm very comfortable using it now. My friend
Would you agree
Praveen.
with the idea? Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Can we take the perspective of our friend Praveen, who wants to say something?
Yes,
Hello.
Praveen, please.
Hello. I have been programming a lot of web platforms, and I've also dabbled with a lot of education-related software and platforms like Canvas, LMS, or even gone into Big Blue Button, and I've in fact host my own server there. And the iOS and Android debate for me, as after I started dabbling in web technologies, has boiled down to saying that the security part is more like a common ground for every OS or every software that's available, and security is at the back end, and iOS does not offer any security as such as compared to Android or Windows OS rather. And if we go to look at the history of the way Windows and iOS kind of started off as competitors, then you realize that because there are so many Windows PCs, so there will be people trying to make a virus for a Windows PC than for a Mac. So the evolution of viruses and security has been more. It depends more on how much usage that device has or that OS or platform has. So lots of viruses for Windows.
Just stopping you there, Praveen. Just telling you one thing that means asking you, directing you towards this thing, the whole market of antivirus. When you mentioned the antivirus,
exactly. That also makes a lot of sense.
Was a created market. It was a marketing
yes
gimmick.
Yes, it is totally created now.
That's where we are getting into the discussion that it might be a belief, as Mr. Manish used, that
yes,
iOS
I will
might
give
be
a proof for that. I will give a proof for that.
We do
20
have
for 20 years I have used Microsoft Windows without a virus attack ever, if I used Windows provided Microsoft Security Essentials to counter any kind of Windows virus, and it has worked fine for me. For 20 years, there's been no virus attack on my PCs.
Just to understand this debate, everyone, I would suggest there's this movie, The Pirates of the Silicon Valley. Watch it. You will understand how this whole thing of iOS and Android came up, the different operating systems, the idea of Linux being there, get the learners into the mode of learning through you being the facilitator. And that would be it. That's the idea.
I've been working on Linux for at least 10 years now, and it has been very satisfying, and it is very safe, and there is no issue of viruses. So I believe iOS, Android, Linux, Windows, it's all a gimmick, and you can choose what you want, and you can be safe and happy with it.
Yeah, and obviously just introducing right there. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you. Just introducing right there, facilitators, dear facilitators, get into this. Let the students enjoy this. Let the learners enjoy this. Talk a bit about blockchain technology. Talk a bit about artificial intelligence. They are going to love it because it's all about technology. The learners would be implementing what they actually think. There's no end to this discussion of iOS or Android. It's not that we are trying to reach a certain discussion end. We are not looking at the end. Okay, iOS is better, but the reflection is very important that the students should know that the moment they start talking into that small community of 5 people who are using, let's say, an Apple phone, might feel socially better than the rest of the Android users in the cohort. It's about the price factor. It's about the business plan, marketing gimmick, the whole idea of exclusivity. It's a beautiful conversation that you can create with aspect to different subjects, economics, business coming in, everything. With this, I would like to move to the next one where we see this. Mr. Manish, let's open the stage for anyone who wants to talk about anything which is not related to Pringles. What do you see on the screen apart from Pringles?
Miss Aditi is saying, can I ask a question?
Yes, Miss Aditi, go ahead, or we will be allocating the last 5 or 10 minutes for taking questions. So let's try and finish this session. Yes.
If this question is related to the activity, please go ahead. Otherwise, all the other questions will be taking at the end in the Q&A session.
So anybody who wants to say what they see on the screen apart from this beautiful, beautifully stacked crisps by Pringles. Do you see anything else? It's a marketing gimmick, barbecue, pizza, and jalapeno flavors stacked together, having it as a mixed flavor. Yes, Mr. Manish, do we have someone?
I think I can see Mr. Praveen's hand, but I think, is it from the previous or you have raised just now?
Previous one. It is from the previous one, but then Pringles, of course, is targeted marketing, where now they have specialized. First, they made the normal crisp very famous, and now they have started to diversify and brand it as per their established branding marketing.
So, Mr. Praveen, we can take it as a point that we can discuss business here with the students, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have covered up business here. Any other subject that you see with Pringles here? Anyone?
Biology.
What can we develop with biology here?
Preservatives, the heavy use of preservatives, and the flavoring, the artificial flavoring of crisps, which is like quite dangerous for the human health.
And the ongoing research about cancer, the development of new knowledge, old knowledge existing. Thank you. Anything else that we see? Any other subject that we see here?
Globalized market for goods coming out of one particular.
I would cover that as economics or business. Yes.
Political as well.
Political, okay.
Yes, because it does associate itself to a class and a kind of people who are like high flyers or high net worth individuals, or etc.
I think again, social value. Pringles, the people who consume it might consider themselves socially
elite,
more relevant, elite, the term being used. But I do see a lot of maths and physics here. Mr. Manish, you were saying something.
I was saying that Miss Aditi has raised a hand and she wants to say something regarding the same activity.
Please.
Yeah. No, this actually hand was raised for a long time. So I have the pending questions I'll ask, but I don't know whether it is relevant here. Can this be a form of persuasive writing in English? I don't know what is happening in English though, but it's kind of persuasion, right? They show some nice things to you and you feel like eating. So I don't know.
You can go ahead and create an activity like that.
Yeah.
In one of your classrooms as a discussion, yes. But the most relevant thing here that it has been used, Pringles has been used, is maths. There is a certain thing. And before we go ahead with maths, I would like to ask the question. Generally, if you see not a manhandled Pringles box, have you ever seen a broken Pringle crisp inside the box?
No.
So would anyone try and talk and think about why is that so? Because normally packets that we have, go ahead.
One, they are all shaped perfectly enough to counter any physical stress, such that they are safe in all circumstances. They can be transported across continents without breaking a single Pringle.
Exactly. So that's physics being implemented.
Yes, to a very high degree.
Implement physics, or there is a very famous, this discussion in the classrooms happening. How can we implement physics in the real life? This is the real life where we can see physics being implemented, and the shape is called hyperbolic paraboloid, which can take pressure in the form of a saddle that we see on the horses. Sciences, a bit of physics, a bit of maths. Initiate discussions. Your students will love it. Your learners would love it. You will start loving the facilitation in TOK. That would move me to this famous image. Does anyone recognize what this is? Anyone with an idea of what exactly could this be? I would put it into context, maybe. Mr. Manish, do we have any hand raised about what this is?
We don't have a hand raised, but people are writing on the chat. And Tower of Babel, somebody's writing.
Yes. So in Spanish, we call it Tower of Babel. I'm going to go ahead with the word Babel, not Babel. So yes, it's a building that was being created. The myth goes that this was a building being created by a certain king. You can start with history there with the subject. It was written a lot about it. This is a painting of the Tower of Babel, where this tower was being created to reach the heights of heaven, and people. There was this certain element where people could, the people who were constructing it, the laborers who were working over there, the construction workers, were all promised a safe passage to heaven when they were alive. When God got scared that, okay, there is a tower being made which can let people reach me, and then one fine day these people who were working in sync with a unified language, everyone started speaking different languages, and that's how languages were created. And that very moment everybody stopped because they could not communicate with each other, because everybody started speaking a different language, and they started going away from Tower of Babel, settling into different parts of the world, and that's how languages were created. A nice idea. Who talked about this? Was it a historian who had a bias, or was the history written by the god himself? Religion. Anyone with any perspective, any insight into it?
You can raise your hand and we will let you speak.
Or you can comment in the chat. Please feel free, whatever mode of communication you prefer. So yes, this is a beautiful example. And once you do the research, yes, Mr. Manish, is there something?
Dr. Lesiona wants to say something, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, Doctor.
Now, saying sometimes when we look at history, we find that, of course, when we match history and the Bible, they seem to have that correlation. Because one, if we look at history, it corresponds to things that happened in the past, and the Bible is the past. So there's that relationship there of history and the language that is being used. So we need to bring them together in our teaching. That aspect of history is there as an area of knowledge, and of course, religion in kind of belief and the language is also there. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So it can beautifully sync your questions with history. Were languages actually created by God, or was the person who actually wrote about, let's say, the Tower of Babel, not just the painting, was actually religiously biased? Or was he favoring God? Was he not favoring God? Did God write the history himself or herself? No matter what the gender of the God is. There was one more thing that I would want to say, that what tools can we implement, or what methods can we implement to talk about, let's say, the relevance of something called a supreme power? What defines a supreme power as the supreme power? Just get into this conversation. Make sure that a lot of religion, or a certain religion, if you are in the geographical context of a certain region where religion might be a taboo, don't get into a certain religion. Talk about God in specific. In general, don't get into a certain religion. Talk about language, the evolution of languages. Language acquisition can be very beautifully implemented here with certain questions that you can ask about belief, about ethics. Is it ethical to really talk to a person who doesn't really know the language, and showing your let's say the word again, supreme power, supremacy. Nowadays, people are talking a lot about Latin, Sanskrit, these languages being I'm not using the word dead, these languages being almost dead because they were exclusive. So how important is it to for a language to be inclusive? Talk about this, get into this conversation, let the learners have the charge of their learning. So with this, I would come to the last section where we are talking about choosing the right situation. It's very important. I have intentionally used the word right here because again, the situation can be very specific to the cohort, as I have been saying. The situation can be very specific to the implications that you might want not to uh, be there in your cohort based on your geographical location, based on your religious location. Yeah, but yes, avoid the bias. We as facilitators at times simply try and choose and go ahead with situations that we are comfortable with as facilitators. So be choose situations that are relevant to the learner, like the Android and the iOS situation. See, the idea is that we have to talk about scope, perspective, methods and tools and ethics, but the situation can be something where the learners can relate to. You don't have to always be comfortable with the maneuvering of the situation. It's completely fine if at times you are letting the students give you a new piece of information on a certain situation. Try and be a risk taker. Try and look at every news piece or object that you're going through with the perspective of TOK and asking the directive knowledge questions at times so that your learners can relate to them in the current context. Again, the mention of COVID-19, the Trump situation in the US, how social media was the biggest factor in controlling the US elections, how these tech biggies got and became the owners of let's say, a big democracy, how they became the big agents of change. Twitter started it, Facebook followed, and the other multiple platforms followed it. Let students be the agents of their own learning. Involve them as much as possible in the decisions, in the optional themes that you're going ahead with. We conduct polls in our cohort as to why and which optional theme they would want to go ahead with. The guide says that you can simply, as a facilitator, go ahead with choosing the optional theme, but I would say that you can involve the students, the learners, being the agents, and they can be involved. At times, you might not realize that a certain optional theme might be more interesting for your learners and involve a lot of social media. Here is where we can tackle with the whole idea of fake news, with the whole idea of um, choosing the right links, choosing the right news, or choosing the right source, avoiding plagiarism, avoiding the bias. And with this, we'll move to the last section where we are simply going to talk about how can we make it great by simply following these three steps: establishing enriching conversations within the cohort. They have to understand what is enriching because we have already established the core values there, the consensual agreements. With this, they have to understand that every point of view, every opinion is important. They can at least consider it in the next time they are going to make an opinion about it. Use the core values and the consensual agreements as mentioned. Often initiate discussions about the different perspectives, local and global community. Again, the context is very important for you as a facilitator, as the cohort. They have to understand at times you simply might not want to get into religion based on the context, the geographical location that you're in. So always talk about the local and the global community, but at times avoid those certain areas that you might want to. Talk to your leadership team if required, because TOK can get sensitive. Be inquisitive, and accept any fresh and different idea that might be coming in. We as facilitators also have to start learning to be the learners first. And the moment we can instill these simple habits in the classroom, consensual agreements, the core values, implementing a bit of framework, choosing the right situation, we are going to make the learning great for our learners. because we are the facilitators who have to first be the learners. That would be it from my side as of now. I would go to this slide where it's more about thanking you for being there. We have extended the time by 30 minutes, but I hope it was enriching for you. I hope it helps us making our TOK lessons great, making our TOK learning great. This would be my email ID. If you have anything to tell us, if you have anything to ask us, if you have anything to inform us, get in touch with this. And after that, we would be moving to the feedback session. The feedback forms are already there. If you're still here, if you have not left, please fill up the feedback form along with this question where we don't need the answer from you. This is just a question with this situation where we want to ask you if you were the designer, if you were the software designer for, let's say, a self-driving car, and there would be a situation in when you're programming the whole idea, if the car is in an accident and there's only one choice to save either the pedestrian or the person who's in front of the car or the person who owns the car, would there be a bias in your decision when you're defining that program? Think about it, take it ahead. I would say that we can open up, let's say, the session for some questions, Mr. Manish.
Yes, sir. I have some questions with me, sir, which I would like you to answer. One question which is important from Ms. Nandini is CAS and TOK integration. Can we have some discussion on that?
Yes, we can have. It's very simple. It's the moment you talk about uh, creativity, the moment you talk about activity, the moment you talk about service, it's all related to the local and the global community. So the moment you're talking, you're getting the perspective of the community in place, automatically you will be able to design certain aspects of, let's say, helping the community through your creativity. So I think this can be one of the basic elements how we can relate CAS with TOK. But yes, if there are more suggestions, we are open to it. Means this would be the basic idea of how we can do that. But yes, we can open a discussion, or you can send us an email. We can establish a conversation. We can go ahead with that.
Sir, more things are coming up. One very important thing with Kavalya Menon has said that the third factor who stands between me and my dreams to be realized. I think she was referring to your previous discussion when you were talking about the steps where student as agents and those things, I think.
So is there a question there?
Excuse me. Yeah. No,
Yes,
you
please go.
asked me that. You asked that how do you define the belief or power or something. That time I wrote.
Okay. Okay.
How to answer, poll or answer the questions? There is a link, sir. I have shared the link 2-3 times for the Google form. It's there.
Yes, that feedback form is just asking you for your name, email ID, a certain objective type, 2 or 3 questions, and any suggestion that you have at the end. That feedback form would be there. You can just click on it and it will be very easy to submit. And please, if you have a word of advice for us, you can post it in the chat as well. If you have anything to update us with, was it enriching? Was it learning? Did we cover up the session objectives? Anything that you would want to talk about, just post it here in the chat. You want to get in touch, you have the email ID. I can type the email ID right here. If you have not been able to take it, get in touch. We can have an enriching conversation again. I would not say that we can get into touch by talking about how to enhance it. We can learn together.
Sir, Ms. Shilpa is asking, so I think she's again referring to language acquisition. Should we have the discussion in English? Please advise the acquisition question.
Just a moment. I'm putting my email ID. Yes. Okay. So Miss Shilpa is asking, should we have the discussion in English? Miss Shilpa, it completely depends on what stage of the language acquisition you are. If you're having, let's say, a language BHL classroom, I would suggest every word of it to be in the language. If you're having, let's say, a language BSL classroom, the differentiation automatically being there, you can have 70 to 80% of the conversation in the language, the target language. Let them guess. At times, there are words that they might want to guess, and these words would automatically help them in their final exams as well in the language acquisition platform, the target language that you're aiming at. And yes, if you're having, let's say, an ab initio class, I would suggest 80% of it to be in English, while the important vocabulary words can still be used in the target language. Why not?
Miss Aditi has two questions, couple of questions. She's saying, please unmute yourself and you can ask Miss Aditi.
She
Thank you.
has raised her hand,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. First of all, it was a very enriching session for a new IB teacher like me. What I want to ask here specifically is now, for example, there can the iOS and Android, the debate that was going on. It is quite possible that the kid may not know, somebody like me who's not tech savvy. Okay, it's quite possible that they know nothing. So, do you let the children know beforehand that we will be discussing this? Read up and come.
It completely depends on how you want to design it, Ms. Aditi. Take the
Hmm.
liberty. Let them
Okay.
be the agents. Again, I would refer to that and be a risk taker. Let's say you are not comfortable with the technological terms, but the
Yeah.
kids are very comfortable with the whole idea of blockchain technology, artificial intelligence. Let them be the agents. Learn. We as facilitators also have to
Learn more.
be at the stage where we
Yeah.
are ready to learn. The moment we are ready to learn, it doesn't take more than 2 days to understand those basic terms. And the moment we start doing our research, because obviously when we put up this question, we have designed our classroom around that.
Yes.
So the
Yeah.
moment we talk about, the moment you put it on Google, let's say iOS or Android, thousands of links would be coming in. You just have to be very careful in the selection of the right resources, I would say, as the fake news, the fake ideas coming in. And Mr. Praveen was here
Yeah.
as a tech expert. We had a discussion, and you don't have to aim at a certain conclusion. You don't have to aim at a certain definition of which is better. You have to
Okay.
aim at different perspectives, the scope of
Got got it.
the
Yeah.
exploration of iOS or Android. But yes, be a risk taker. I would say that.
No, I was asking these questions from kids' point of view because I'm not a TOK teacher, but then I know every teacher is a TOK teacher. I am a DP biology teacher, and there are certain theories in there which the kids may not know, and I may have to introduce to them. So that's why I asked: Is it, are we supposed to let that kids know? Second thing is, and you said you are a Spanish teacher yourself, and I know that every unit has links to TOK, so it's really not possible to include all of them, but how is that we should include them, because there are times when the I'm so much struggling to cover my portion that it's not possible to include that TOK in my day to day teaching.
You don't really have to think about it. What happens is the moment you're designing your unit,
Hmm.
uh, pick up those 12 concepts from TOK. The
Okay.
moment you refer to the TOK guide, you will find those 12 concepts.
Okay.
Refer to those 12 concepts, and you will certainly find at least 4 concepts that directly are linked to your subject. IB has been very specific about that. Just choose one of the concepts from there. The moment you pick up values, it will be very useful to use the term values in biology, let's say, or perspectives or interpretation. The interpretation of data being very important there, right? The
Okay.
certain context of ethics being so important
Yes,
for biology.
ethics. Yeah. Yeah.
Just add up a certain element. You don't really have to talk about TOK in your
Okay.
classroom. If you're talking, just raise the question, is it ethical, and let them explore it.
Okay. Thank you.
Just know your context of the cohort, and intervene if required. Intervene if you think it is required. Again, it is very contextual. You have to know in your context when is the intervention needed.
Thank you so much, Rahul sir. It was really great. Thank you.
There is one doubt that I have. Usually, Can I go ahead with my question, please? I'm sorry for not raising
Yes,
my hand.
just identify yourself. I'm just unable to see.
Praveen, I'm
Mr.
Praveen
Praveen.
here.
Yes, go
Yes,
ahead, please.
I teach physics. I teach physics. Now, ethics, yes, are an issue, but I would rather have my uh, kids know more about the way the entire evolution of thought or knowledge has come about in terms of history, in terms of contribution from contradictory views that have come about in history, and that makes me not uh, a side spectator. It kind of puts me in that role where I'm supposed to give them a lot of inputs, and it does take away a lot of free discussion, as you described it, Rahul. There, great idea that you should let them talk, you should let them engage themselves. But in sciences, it becomes particularly difficult because people don't have opinions. Like in a political situation, or when you're discussing politics, you have opinions, so it becomes easy for you to correlate that with the idea of knowledge. Whereas in science, it becomes a challenge.
Can I
Okay.
intervene, sir?
Yes,
As a
Mr. Manish,
physics
let
teacher,
me just point it
yeah,
out with the perspective of a person who doesn't deal with science, and
yes,
then
sir.
Mr. Manish himself is a physics expert, Mr. Praveen, so he can talk about it. But
Sure,
over
please.
here, I would say that it's very important for you to refer to the first point where we were choosing the situation. The first point was avoid the bias. You being a physics facilitator, I'm using the
Mhm.
term, doesn't mean that your students might be fully interested in physics. That's the first point, because they might have a very keen interest in history as such, as you mentioned, history being a part of physics. Get into the mode where you either introduce them to the concepts that you want them to discuss in the class before the start of the class, or let them explore as free birds, and at the end sum it up with a set of let's say physical the terms related to physics, the formulas that you want to talk about, because once they have explored and they come back to the ground reality, it gives them the perspective again. So the designing of the lesson can completely be controlled by you. I'm using the word control here, but while the lesson is going on, you have to avoid the bias. It's very important, because you know you're an expert of physics, but you don't really want all your students who are present in the classroom to be the experts of physics. They might become very big historians, right? So the holistic development needs to be focused upon. This would be my perspective. Let's see what Mr. Manish has to say here. Mr. Manish.
I just wanted to say, sir, if they don't have opinions, we have to create opinions actually. If I am a physics teacher, if I go to a class and if I want to integrate TOK in my physics class, what I will do is I will start a discussion with a question of a day actually. And the question of a day is such a question which will definitely opinionate the students who are sitting in my class, right? So you can start that kind of an activity in a day when you go to a class, start with a question of a day and tell them the objective of your class actually. Start with an objective and then create a question of a day and create opinion, sir. I think that would, because it has helped me in my class, that's why I'm sharing it with you.
Yes, that's a good idea, Mr. Manish. Thank you. I recognize my my argument or my standpoint as against to Mr. Rahul is that in terms of science, when we have this huge difficulty of uh, opinions, which because children are not able to form opinions because they lack information, and when I provide the information, it already has an inbuilt idea of promoting physics. Like for example, uh, I would want them to learn a few things about physics, and which is why I'm giving them a particular example. Now, how do I avoid that? Because I would want the students to come around that example and reach a conclusion and an opinion of their own, which is what is getting difficult. I am able to introduce the concept. I'm able to introduce the idea. I'm able to initiate the discussion. But then I realize that I'm trying to push my analysis or my understanding on them after a point.
Okay. So I would say, Mr. Praveen, here that it's also important to understand that we cannot have every class, let's say in very specific context to your physics lessons. We cannot have every class which develops or builds up on the idea of TOK. You can have, let's say, a set of lessons, 4 or 5 lessons, building up with the specific concepts of physics, and then let them have a certain day of exploration where it's more about exploring the implementation of physics in the real life world, where we talk about the real life situations. Means if that is how, means we cannot really try and talk about every lesson being that. So yes, your designing of the lessons would also depend on, let's say, after 5 days of core physics, you suddenly get into the mode of letting them explore. If that is somewhat answering your question.
Yes, it is. It is in a way. Yes, it is. Because either we have to allow them to reach conclusions themselves. That is a big
Or means
requirement.
physics, being a science teacher, you would talk about conclusions, but at times it's important not to have a conclusion. It's important to have to understand the pressure of the real world when they step out of our of our training, of our facilitation, and them being learners when they step out in the university. They have to know that there has to be a balance between certain aspects. At times there is no answer to a certain situation. So conclusion being the most important word of sciences, I do understand the bias that we might have as science teachers towards having something very definite, having something very I would say defined. But at times it is important to know that it's okay to not have an answer to a situation. That's also very important for our kids to learn, for our learners to understand that.
Sir, I would request you to take, I think there are two questions from Ms. Poonam and then Dr. Lesona. We will talk to you also definitely. Ms. Poonam, if you are here, you can ask your question, please. Ms. Poonam, if you are here, you can ask your question. I think she's not here, sir. Dr. Lesona, please go ahead.
Dr. Lesona.
No, I am here, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Actually, I would like to thank you both for such an enriching workshop. My question was how much TOK is enough, but you've just answered that question by talking about physics, that it's not necessary that we have to pull TOK into our every topic or every day this thing. So that has actually answered my question. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, okay.
I'm an ESS teacher, so actually there are so many things we can actually have a discussion on.
ESS loves TOK.
Yeah, that's what. But I never know how much is enough, or how much of TOK should be included. So that is what I was.
As long as you see that your cohort has started making references to TOK in your subject, you have achieved the I would say objective.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Lesona, please.
Yes. I'd like to bring in the issue of the concepts in TOK that were being brought in the discussion about physics. When we look again at another area of knowledge, which is history, there are interesting concepts there, which are interpretation. We know that we rely more on interpretation, even if sometimes we can use first-hand account. But at the end, whoever is collecting data has to interpret that. So it's not always the case that you will find that the conclusions are the same. Hence, I like it when that is said that most of the time we don't have to be looking forward to looking at the conclusions. We must find the process. How did we get there? So, which is how did we know? So, I think it's very, very important that when we look at those concepts in the TOK, then it's not always that we are going to get consensus and we are not going to get proper conclusions. Thank you.
Yes, I completely agree. And there is always this introduction that I generally go ahead with. We as a team, Mr. Manish and I, we generally talk about this very simple term called the how and the why of the what. we have to understand the how of the what, which is the knowledge, the why of the what, which is the knowledge. The moment we can interpret this question in itself, we have been able to implement that habit of developing the TOK perspective in the learners. I think there's another hand raised, Ms. Aditi Kulkarni. Would you want to ask a question?
I think it was there from the previous discussion. I think so.
Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, I would again like to thank everyone. Please don't forget to fill up the feedback form. That is important for your certificates of participation. And if you want to say anything, if you want to update us with anything, if you want to give a personal feedback, our email ID is there. We have provided the email ID. You can get in touch through that. Ms. Ambali has a question. Ms. Ambali, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for the enriching session. I am a biology teacher as well as a TOK teacher. I would really want you to have another session for the TOK exhibition, since it's a very new concept. If you could arrange for one where we all can learn together again.
The idea of this session, Ms. Ambali, was to actually focus on at times why TOK becomes a fear factor kind of thing for certain facilitators. And yes, we do have a series of sessions coming up through the GGS training center for teachers. You will get the invites and links. We will cover up the exhibition and put that in the feedback form. We do have a certain section in the feedback form. Just put it there and we will come up with certain requests and everything. This session was mainly not about the technicalities of the TOK curriculum. This session was mainly about having fun with the concept.
Concept of TOK. Yes, thank you so much. Even if we could include the concepts, how can we link the concepts to different AOKs kind?
Oh, yes. Concepts and AOKs see, TOK has selected those 12 concepts so that at least 2 or 3 concepts go in sync with every possible subject combination. So we can have a discussion on that. We can have a session on that. We will plan it and you will be notified of that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think there are no more questions. If there are some questions, we ask you to unmute yourself and ask, please. Otherwise, we will finish the session in 5 minutes. I think, sir, no questions are here. So we can just.
Not a question. It's not a question, but I would like to thank both Mr. Manish and Mr. Rahul. Along with, I would also like to thank Miss Dr. Pronounce her name. Can I?
Dr. Lesona.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lesona, for the great input. Yes, it does make sense. It made the entire thing, the discussion, complete when she said that it is the means that we take to reach our goal, or the path we take to reach our goals. Yes, there are contradictions when we are investigating an IA or an experiment or a virtual discussion. Thank you, Mr. Sona, Dr. Lesona, and it was a great session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Praveen.
Sir, from Ms. Aditi, can we have a session for Group 4 Project 2? So since I am related to that department, I will definitely put forward this to Ms. Vaduhi, our head of school, and let's see if we can plan a session on Group 4. I would love to have a session on Group 4 with all of you. It will be an honor.
Thank you very much.
We will be
forwarding. Audience, thank you for your patience. Ms. Ambali, your hand is raised. get a recording of the link.
You will get a recording of yesterday's session on English.
I think somebody's mic is on with the TV in the background.
Sir, I have actually muted everyone for some time. Yes.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Anyway, so yes, thank you. And I again want to apologize to everyone present again that we did overshoot by some time, but that's the nature of TOK. We cannot really stop conversations. We cannot really stop explorations. And thanks once again, Mr. Manish. If you have to add something, please go ahead.
No, sir. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of this session and spending your time and being in a collaborative session with us. I think it is a great learning experience for both ways, for us also, for you also. And we will be in future conducting a lot of workshops like this for collaborating with the teaching community all over the world. Thank you very much for being here. So we are finishing the session. If you don't have any further questions, you can leave. Thank you very much.
Ms. Nandini, you will get a recording of yesterday's EE session. A link will be provided to you very soon. Same answer for you, Ms. Ambali, if you're there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Smita ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Ms. Shipra, if it is about the links, you will get it if you have filled up the feedback form, because that's our access to your email ID. So if you have not yet filled up the feedback form, please go ahead and just write to Rajat's email ID. If it is about the extended essay link, and if it is about the link for today, if you filled up the feedback form, we'll automatically send you the link very soon.
Thank you very much for being here. Please, if you have no further questions, you can leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.